So I finally did some research and I figured out. So I want to say something. I think 2022's weather was more raw than 2021 after the winter. And what I mean is that there's really been this lack of spice. If you look at the New York City weather we got for June 2022, one thing I want that if you look at it you'll see is how little points there were because there wasn't really anything to talk about. Indeed, for a lot of months, there was this lack of pizzazz that 2021's weather seemed to have, especially with temperature swings that we had in the beginning of the year, but then it seemingly died down. I want to really put an emphasis comparing the first half of the year and straggle into the later couple days of the year. Because I really do think that this lack of really anything, it speaks something to me. If we compare January 2022 had a wider temperature variation, with the temperature getting up to 59 degrees on January 2nd, and with the lowest temperature of the month being 9 degrees on January 16th and on January 31st. Interesting to note that on January 16th, the high temperature still managed to clock in at 42 degrees, which is interesting given how cold the low temperature was. But the reason why it was able to do that was mainly because, I will not be going that way. The reason why it managed to still do that was just mainly because of a winter storm riding up, but it actually brought rain here. The following day, the temperature peaked at 47 degrees or something like that, maybe 46 or 45. But then the temperature began to steadily fall back to about freezing at midnight as more temperature swings continued. However, excluding the first 2 days of January, the highest temperature in the month was actually similar to 2021's here at like 48, 49 degrees. It was 9 degrees Celsius either way. I think it was 48 here. It's interesting how January 1st had a low higher than every single day except January 2nd's high. And that's one thing that you need to look at too, is that when you look at these temperatures, one thing you have to see is that, well, yes, it's possible the morning could be in the 50s. The low temperature will only be in the 50s or higher if it manages to hold above that from midnight to midnight, which I think is stupid. But that's just the rules. It's interesting to note, though, how December 16th, as a matter of fact, had a low of 52 and a high of 61, and it's a very rare time in December you actually have a whole calendar day with a low in the 50s. This will not repeat itself, though, until April. We'll obviously have the rest of 2022 write this calendar legacy, but I do want to compare this because I think that, especially February, is where the spice began to peak. It began to peak. But excluding but January 1st had a low of 49 degrees and a high of 53. Now, obviously that's the first day of the year with a low in the 40s. Cross out that day because January 2nd still had a low of 37 despite its high of 59. Even though the morning low temperature was in the 50s, again, because of that stupid rule of 24 hours, once the temperature crash began to come in, it all went downhill from there. So from that point, the next time there would be a low in the 40s would be on February 12th. That would also pose to be, with a low of 42, the high was 61 degrees that day, and would also pose to be our first 60-degree day. For reference, in 2020, our first 60-degree day was when it hit 64 degrees on the 9th of March, which is actually a bit crazy how late that is, because typically it does hit the 60s at least once in January and February. So that's about all with January's weather. that's all January's weather. So yeah, February we would see the last day with the highs constrained to the 20s in both years, with it being the 16th of February in 2022 with a high of 26, and it would, and with a high of 29 on February 18th, that would be the last day with a high stuck in the 20s in 2021. In both cases, there was snow events, but in the case of 2021, it was a cold front after a snow event. Now, I know I told you how February 12th had a low in the 40s and a high in the 60s, so it might seem so weird how there was a day immediately after that, the high only in the 20s. Basically, you got to 42 at 6 o'clock, and we got very lucky that managed to hold it, because at midnight it was 43. That would be the high temperature the next day, as quite a couple of inches of snow, I think 4 inches of snow, came down on us. In my location, it was 1.5 in the city center itself. The snow began to come down on us throughout the day, and it was a lot more persistent than originally believed. There wasn't really a snow advisory. I know I've seen an article from March 17 that goes, it's 60 degrees, so here's a snow advisory. It's like, oh my God, that must be so frustrating, because the temperature would have to plummet from 60 down to like the mid 30s, and then snow would have to fall. And this snow can be significant on occasion. It really just can be significant snow. I mean, the Denver metro area recently saw over a foot of snow after temperatures were approaching or exceeding 90 degrees. In a single hour in Denver, the temperature dropped from 85 degrees down to 59 degrees, which was colder than the morning low all day. And it managed to get down to 41 by midnight, as the next day would fall to freezing and snow would begin to fall. Heavy snow. So yeah. Meanwhile, okay, so that's what happened. As far as that last day in the 20s, they were about similar timing. And the last time the low was in the teens, I keep forgetting when it was in 2021, and this bothers me. I know in 2022 it was on February 16th when the low got down to 17 degrees. February 6th and 16th in February would have the lowest low of the month at 15 degrees. I messed this up in my notes that I took. That's how I know all this. Maybe I actually use that. No, I don't know. So that's that. And the high temperature in February was 69 degrees, which would hit on February 23rd, which is actually kind of insane, and that was in Seattle. That was frustrating because even though I thought initially it got to that temperature on March 18th, as it turns out, it wouldn't get that warm again until the 12th of April. But I know a lot of my friends who were in Plainview actually did take advantage of the warm weather. One of them by taking an hour and a half long walk with their friend, enjoying the temperatures in the upper 60s, which really is a gift here. While the morning low was in the upper 40s, the actual low temperature that day was 38 due to a searing cold front, and you actually got very lucky that got this warm because the cold front was delayed. It could have very easily been a day where you had a high in the 50s, which I mean, you had a couple of highs in the 50s before. Really, when it gets this warm in February, it's a gift. And there's always cold coming in behind all this. So the next day, the high was only in the 30s. And my plane landed, and it was freezing. Oh, also, we had below average temperatures in Seattle when we went. Yay! But not really. Oh, and I think the one day it got warm in Seattle, we were in Vancouver where it was about 3 or 4 degrees colder. Oh, when we drove to Portland, snow was falling. Yay! In contrast, so in January 2021, January had, so in January 2021, the high of 53 was actually also on January 2nd, and the low of 15 was on January 29th and 30th. In February, they would have a high of 53 again on February 16th and 27th. And their lowest temperature was 12 degrees on February 8th and 9th. Yes, that's what it was. So obviously the winter was a lot more raw, and it was actually a lot more snowfall there. 2021, 2022's the snow was near average here, but it was above average last winter. New York City saw the 8th snowiest February on record, as a matter of fact, with 26 inches of snow falling. Also, we had the snowiest first day of any month in September, it actually followed by its rainiest first day of any month, with 7.13 inches of rain falling in New York City on that day. And it either come in 24 hours earlier, New York City would have had its wettest instead of its second wettest summer on record. Delightful. Now, moving along, so that's kind of how everything was. But by March, the weather begins to bland up. The low temperature was 20 degrees here on March 4th in 2022. Last year it was 21 degrees on March 2nd in 2021. But in 2021, the high temperature managed to hit 82 degrees on March 26th. This year, it only hit 66 degrees on March 18th, both of which were Fridays. So that's delightful. Anyway, as far as more temperature milestones, both years had their last days in the 20s on the state, but different times. In 2021, it was when it got to 26 on March 26th. No, it couldn't have been March 26th. Damn it. March 23rd, I think. No, not March 23rd. March 21st or 22nd? Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm forgetting my dates and this is bad. I think it was March 21st. Now, in 2022, the last day with a low in the 20s would be on March 30th, when the low gets down to 28 degrees, as part of the third day of a major cold snap. But and actually really the fourth at that point. If you're including that, then you really have to include the 27th as well. It was March 30th when this happened. Having said that, 2021 did have a later date with their last high in the 30s, as that was April 2nd of 2021, when the high only hit 38. Once the high hit 39 on March 29th, as part of that same cold snap, every single day would have a high in the 40s or higher. And a big reason why all this could happen is because while they're that kind of a cold snap too, it wasn't as brutal, and the low temperatures didn't get anywhere near as low. But the high temperatures weren't really much better, and they were actually at midnight too, so the afternoon high temperatures were only like 36. This was because of a line of storms that came down on April 1st, and the temperature tumbled that day after 2 o'clock in the morning. April 1st of both years had storms. It's just that the temperature tumbling was a little bit different, but in the end, both had the same result. We're kind of straddling on the border between March and April, and I still have more temperature milestones for March. There weren't really any in 2021 at all. At all. And as a matter of fact, up until this point, we still have a very interesting thing where the highest low temperature for the first quarter of the year was still that 49-degree day and 49-degree low on January 1st. It wouldn't get better. Not until April, at least. Not until April. But in 2021, yes, they first of all, they had their first day with a low in the 40s. And annoyingly, I can't remember what that day is. I think scared to say it was March 6th, which, did I put that in my notes that was the first night with the low in the 40s? If I did, I have to change it. I have to change it to February 12th if I did. Now, in March, I think, when was it, the first day with the, I don't know. It had to have been, though, I think March 9th at the latest, because I think maybe it was March 9th. Maybe it was March 9th. It could have been earlier, but I think between March 5th and 9th, and I should remember all this, but I guess I didn't check over my notes early enough. I know most of the stuff, though. Most of it. March 21 also the first day with the low temperature in the 50s, when the low hit 50 on the 26th of March, right before that searing day of 82 degrees, which actually really is searing for March, and one of the highest March temperatures here ever. Oh, and this video is fully built on AccuWeather data, just in case you wanted to know who is providing all this to me. I don't want to say providing because it sounds weird, but I'm using this off of AccuWeather. Because if you go to Dark Sky, they say the low was 49 and the high was 77 on this day. So anyway, after you get to, this was the first day where it gets both into the 70s and 80s in 2021. And I feel like it might happen in 2022, you'd be a bit disappointed. You really would be a bit disappointed. I'm telling you. Because what happens is that in 2021, in April, the high is 74 degrees on April 28th, and the low is 30 degrees on April 2nd and 3rd. In 2021, the low is 34 degrees on April 18th, and the high is only 73 degrees on April 14th. Now, according to AccuWeather, on April 12th, we finally get our first day of the year, and first day since December 16th, which feels weird to say. With a low temperature in the 50s, when the low hits 50 itself on April 12th. That also becomes our first day in the 70s, when the high temperature hits 71. It appears, though, that a lot of people in my school did not really know about this because they were still wearing some of their winter-ish clothing on such day, which was a bit weird to me. Or maybe not winter-ish clothing, but definitely not as light as they did on March 18th, where I get it. Both days were forecast to have highs of 70, and March 18th was supposed to have a low of 50 as well. But sometimes the thermometer doesn't always go the way you want it to. That being said, you can begin to see how while 2021 starts out blander, 2022 overall becomes the blander year. Especially because though April 12th and 14th will be the only days in the 70s the entire month, which I think it might have been the same way for April 2, April 20th and 29th, but at least they had the spice in March. New York City actually hit 85. They got lucky on April 28th. I guess if you want high temperatures, that is. Us, not so much. This actually has happened in March too. On both March 7th and 18th, they managed to hit the 70s. And while on March 18th we weren't that far behind them, on March 7th we really were, because we only hit 62 degrees. That was the most that we got. The wind off the water really helped screw the Long Island region over completely in March, and so when it gets warm, that heat is kind of capped off in a way. And just 2 days after that, March 9th, on March 9th, we actually get measurable snowfall. Seeing what happened on March 12th. So those are a couple of chilly days in March. And then, of course, the end of the month where the polar vortex completely broke down. But that's kind of how our April was. It was a lot blander. In terms of the day where the last low was in the 30s, well, in 2021, the low hit 38 on April 21st. But surprisingly, AccuWeather keeps the low temperatures at 40 on both the 28th and 29th. I would have thought it got 38 on the 28th and 39 on the 29th. But we are using AccuWeather, so we are stuck leaving it at these values. And as far as the last time this happened in 2021, it was on April 23rd after a cold front where the low temperature dipped down to 39. Now, the last day with a high in the 40s would actually also happen in April in both years, but at vastly different times. April 3rd, get that right, April 3rd in 2022, April 22nd in 2021. April 3rd, the high only hits 47 degrees thanks to rain. It was kind of a raw day, if you get what I'm saying. But it's the last day that it managed to, from midnight to midnight, to hold below 50 degrees. There are some days that get close. Don't get me wrong on that. There are some days that get close. But this is the last day where it manages to actually stay below 50 for a whole day. There will get plenty of days over April break, as a matter of fact, where the high would be stuck in the low 50s, which is never fun. Oh, and I was doing a lot of outdoor stuff too. Oh, and it was also very windy. It did push wind chills to the 30s, which actually happened as recently as May 9th this year. But you'll discover something special about May 9th in a little bit. You really will. I'm telling you what happened in 2022. You'll find just how raw, or not really raw, but how bland the weather can get in the spring. How the temperatures really just begin to moderate after some point. And on that note, okay, it's time for us to begin to get into May's weather. So we know about how so we kind of know about how oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you what it was on April 22nd, the last day got below the high was constrained below 50. Yeah, that was because of the April 21st cold front. The high only hit 49 degrees. And the low was pushed close to freezing. Yeah, it was actually really impressive. How the weather is beginning to moderate. But I think once you get to May, you'll discover how bland it was. So May 1st had a low temperature for both days of the month. 40 degrees in 2022, 43 in 2021. But here's where it begins to differ. It begins to differ the second that you get into, well, I have to actually, maybe I should double check to make sure April 30th didn't hit the 30s, even though I'm 99% sure it didn't. Maybe I'll just check. I think it was 41. But anyway, where it begins to differ is the high. First of all, the high was 91 on May 21st in 2020, and it was 93 on May 31st, 2022. So already it's sounding a bit more pizzazzy. And that's true. It was more pizzazzy in those retrospects. As a matter of fact, that was the highest May temperature we saw since 2000, though we did manage to get even higher in April of 2002. The mercury really just seared on that day due to a buildup of heat that was occurring into Memorial Day, because valleyed between our 90-degree weather, we actually got some days that got to 50 degrees. Well, I actually only had one May 25th. Now, 50 degrees would also happen on May 10th, but when was the last time we hit 49 degrees or got colder? May 9th. That's right, it was very early. The low temperature was 45 degrees too, but that was the last time it got into the 40s. This year, it was May 9th. I guess because of the Memorial Day storm, the Mother's Day weekend storm, a ridge began to pull through. So every single day had highs that were kept in the 50s or above. But guess when our first low of 60 degrees was? May 21st. So from May 10th to 20th, every single day had a low in the 50s. Because it was 50, then 52, then 57, I want to say. Then I think 57 or 58. Then 59 on May 14th, so close. Then 58. Maybe it was 57, and then 58 on a Monday, then 55, then 55, then 54, and then 51. There's a lot of days where I had the thermometer managed to get a few degrees lower, like 1 or 2, well, actually 2. It would have managed to hit the 40s, and we actually got pretty close on quite a lot of days. And the first week of May was really just below normal and bland, but those conditions will completely exit because the last time the high was kept into the 50s was Mother's Day, May 8th, with a high of 58. After that, it seems that like this kind of ridge pulled through, which again would keep the temperatures a lot higher and would completely just eradicate any sense of the fact that it still wasn't spring. Especially considering that the day before Mother's Day had a high of 51, which we would actually also see on on Memorial Day weekend 2021. So the last time for that year that the high was kept in the 50s in 2021 was May 30th. But it wasn't like anything like 59, 58. It was 52. It was horrible. They had a similar thing where the last time the low was in the 40s was after the last time the high was in the 50s. Because on Memorial Day, May 31st, the low was kept down to 49. Imagine had that Memorial Day weekend been 2 days later, well, it wasn't Memorial Day weekend anymore, but imagine if the storm came in 2 days later, where we could have said that there was a day with a high of 52 degrees in June. Just imagine. Just think about it. How crazy would that sound? And yet, it was close to reality. But because of that, there wasn't even a day with a low in the 50s in June 2021, and a low in the 40s, though this was initially thought to have been true. But the low temperature on June 1st was revised from 49 degrees up to 51 degrees. '51 would also mark the lowest temperature of June 2021, but in June 2022, the lowest temperature would be 54 on both June 5th and 18th. Interestingly enough, in 2022, the high of 91 was actually the day before, June 17th. Was in 2021, it was June 29th and June 30th. 2022, as a matter of fact, had some of the coldest June weather after the 17th. Where we probably had our last day with our high kept in the 60s, because on June 22nd, the high was only 68. The day after June 23rd, I might have to fix some of my notes. I might have messed something up. I'll do that when I get home. I'll do a quick fact check. June 23rd was probably the last day with a low got into the 50s at 59. Given how bland it's being, I mean, I could see it getting into the 50s in July, and it has happened. As a matter of fact, in late July last year, 2021, where it got to 57 on July 31st. The only time this happened, though, between July 4th, 59, and September 3rd, 57. Now, as far as 2021, the last day where the high was consumed below the 60s, it was actually July 3rd. I don't foresee it happening this late this year, though. I actually couldn't have happened this late this year because yesterday got to 86, but I don't foresee it's happening later on in the year. Now, the reason why I say that is because even though, yes, it's July, is because after that, the next time it happened, it wouldn't happen for a very long time. The high was only 63 that day, but that wouldn't actually happen again, where the high would be stuck in the 60s until September. And if I remember correctly, it was like later in September. I think it was September 29th, and even then the high was still 69 degrees. The next day, September 30th, would also have a high stuck in the 60s, as would October 1st. Before on October 2nd, the high would push back into the 70s. Oh my God, October 2021's weather last year? Ridiculous. Anyway, did I cover every single temperature milestone? I think I did. Yeah. I did. But I hope you begin to see what I mean by the weather having less spice. Because even though, yes, in terms of ranges it might be bigger, in terms of like milestones, it's happening at later rates. At least generally it is. I mean, our first day, I forgot in May, our first day of 80 and 90 was the same, where the high hit 90 on May 21st. But there was no day before that, and I repeat, no day before that, where the high managed to before May 21st, the high managed to clock in even at 80. The warmest day before that was May 17th, and even then it was just 78. You couldn't really feel that summery when it was still only 78, and the low was a relatively crisp 55 as the humidity had cleared. We actually had a cold front, but it was delayed, and oh my god, that's quite funny actually. You know, it's just how interesting everything works when the temperatures can really be confined to the same area. How temperatures can be confined to the same area, and but I mean, that these kinds of things do happen, and they happened last year too, just not really in the same interesting ways. Also, last year in June, their first day with a low in the 70s was relatively early, June 6th, where the low was only 71. This year will not happen until July 2nd, where the low would get to 73. But that was, again, the first day of the entire year where the low managed to stay in the 70s. There were a few days where the morning temperatures were in the 70s, but there were always cold fronts. Like that hot May 31st had at midnight was 78, and it would actually continue to trek up from there into the morning. But the backdoor cold front sliced temperatures down to 61 degrees by midnight. Or June 27th also had a morning low of 70, though the high that day was only 77, and it brought forth a cold front, bringing the afternoon low to 68. So for the first half of the year, the low temperature, or the highest low temperature, would only be 69 degrees on June 17th, compared to last year where it got to 75 on June 30th. And the highest temperature would be 93 degrees Fahrenheit on May 31st this year, compared to last year where it was 91 degrees on June 29th, June 30th, and May 21st. It hit 91 on that day as well. Meanwhile, the lowest high temperature would be what would it be? Oh God, I think I have some shaving to do. The coldest high temperature, 21 degrees this year on January 15th. Last year it was January 29th, but it was 26 degrees. So again, 2021 just clearly has an interesting pattern to it in 2022, I will say. It's definitely been interesting and fun to track the weather, even though there's been a lot of disappointments, I think, for me along the way. It's something I still really enjoy to do. You know, just seeing how the days progress is interesting for me. But I think that we can all say that 2021 had more interesting stuff to follow throughout the year than 2022 had. I'm not necessarily implying this in a negative way, because I don't want to be. But I'm just saying what I think is true. Right now it's 80 degrees. Probably not the best way to do it wearing sweatpants. Anyway, there are some interesting comparisons that you can make. Like, for example, between specific holidays. And whatnot. Like, for example, Memorial Day is an interesting one to make. The 4th of July, you could also compare the weekends. That's something that's that you could do, and you could actually get a bit of a hobby out of it. But again, I think that what I want to do is reiterate my points that I've made throughout this video. 2021 started off a bit blander, a bit more temperature constrained, but overall 2022 would grow into be that more temperature constrained type of year. Once you get to about March or so, like if you look at what they had a higher temperature, then yes, it would be 2021 for quite a while, with their 69-degree day on February 23rd, until you get to 82 on March 26th of 2021. Then 2020, I think on May 19th that year, I managed to hit 85. But I think the low that day was still in the 50s. If it's in the 60s and I see anything special, I will make an addendum to this video, because I don't want to be spewing around inaccurate information. If there's holes in it, I think I might fix it. I don't know what I'll do, to be honest. And now I think the final thing that I want to look at is kind of closing periods, where it stays above or below something for a certain amount of time. First of all, we'll do the more summary kind of stuff. So last year, May 31st gets down to 49. October 1st also hits, and this is 2021, also hits 49, but no day between them. So 4 months and 1 day of it being above 50 degrees at all times. We can't really do a 50s comparison because it'll be quite bland. As far as highs in the 60s, once the high temperature hits 77 on July 4th, because yes, it was only 63 on July 3rd, the next time the high would fail to hit 70 would be when it got to 69 on September 29th. So as such, that's quite a good streak, actually. 2 months and 26 days. Of highs in the 70s or above. As far as highs in the 60s or above, well, for May 30th, the high was only 52. But after it gets to a relatively summery 68 on Memorial Day, it would manage to stay above that as a high until maybe October 18th. I have to double check into that. That dark side is saying is 61, but AccuWeather I think might have said it was like, could have been 61 or it could have been 59, or maybe even 58. So I'm going to check into that. I know it was October, by October 26th, however, but it's still an 8-day difference in which I'd kind of like to be filled. And yeah. I think I'm starting to just begin talking and not know what I'm talking about, so I'll stop.